Good evening, everybody. I'd like to call the work session for 6/18/2024 to order. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The public is hereby advised of the audio and video recording of this meeting for the purposes of rebroadcasting. For attendance, we have everybody in attendance with the exception of Ms. Graff. Next, we will go to recognition of guests and scheduled speakers. Dr. Zerbe?
Thank you, Madam President. This evening, myself and David Schrader will present an update as listed on the agenda for the Methacton High School campus planning process. So with that, if you just give me a moment to get to the front of the room, we'll start that presentation. Members of the board, you should have two copies. So tonight, there's actually two presentations. One that'll have a lighter colored presentation, which is up on the screen. I'll be going through those matters. Then partway through that, we'll bring in David Schrader from the Schrader Group to look at the content that's located in this larger handout that you have at your table. So with that said, I'll try to remind you as we switch slides. But this evening, this first part of the presentation is really to just review the purpose, timeline, and decisions that we've made to date. And then we will certainly bring the Schrader Group forward to talk about new school construction, the concept design status. And then we'll end with the high school campus decision timeline. How do we move forward? And what does the next several months look like? So if you recall, I'm on slide 3. You recall the high school campus was part of a district-wide facilities assessment that we accepted in 2023. We know that the district office would have about $1 million of needed renovation, transportation about $300,000 worth of renovation, and Methacton High School was slated for about $69 million worth of renovation. So in total, a $70 million renovation on the Methacton High School campus led us to slide 4, where we believe it's imperative that we develop a comprehensive campus plan that considers the educational, operational, and financial context to ensure that the future investments in the Methacton High School campus support the mission of the district and the vision for our high school and campus for the next 50 years. On slide 5, you will see a timeline, a previous timeline. If this goes all the way back to a previous facilities assessment report back in 2016, AEM Architects completed that assessment, all the way through an HVAC assessment done by Moore Engineering, and then certainly to the 2022 high school HVAC project redevelopment with additional scope, which when we originally thought we were going to be spending somewhere in the neighborhood of $12.7 million, with the additional scope and the soft costs, the projection for that high school HVAC renovation was somewhere in the neighborhood of $25 million. And slide 6. We also know that we, as a district, engaged a third-party national firm, Bureau Veritas, to conduct an updated facilities assessment. We had, in 2023, developed and established an updated master facilities plan, where it includes the assessment with conditions, including the district's projected $221 million investment in district facilities over the next 10 years. It led us to a September through December 2023 Methacton High School campus planning process, a number of activities, including tours, discussions, debate, etc. And then it got us to 2024 in February, where the Methacton High School campus planning committee report was issued, and we presented pre-conceptual scenarios with estimated cost. If you go to slide 7, you can see that the pre-conceptual scenarios were presented. There were 4 options. One was an in-place renovation that would likely cost between $95 to $99 million. Option 2, a renovation plus an auditorium and natatorium as listed. And then option 3, renovations plus auditorium, natatorium, and some classroom additions. And then the 4th option was new construction. And new construction was broken down by total square foot, with option 4A being total square footage of 308,000 square foot, with a projected estimated cost of $175 million to $183 million, or option 4B under new construction of 345,000 square feet for $195 million to $205 million. At that time, we also looked at these options on the next slide, where we looked at our priorities that were developed through the Methacton High School campus planning process, and we created this, what we call a heat map, that lays out some of the priorities and how they are accomplished within the available options. And as you can see, we recognize then, as we do now, that option 4 clearly is the only option that addresses all of the major priorities, and therefore we decided, and on the next slide, slide 9, to take a motion on March of 26 of 2024 to approve the administration to prepare recommendations for a comprehensive high school campus plan that, first, engages the board-approved architect, owner's representative, and solicitor, provides no less than 3 concept designs with estimated cost, timelines, and impact for a new high school, provides for public input on concept designs, and provides recommendations and feedback to be presented at a special meeting in the future. With that, on that evening, with the approval of that motion, we engaged, following that timeline, engaged the Schrader Group. And with that, tonight, the Schrader Group is here to present a status report of where we are in the development of that process. David? Advance to the right.
Okay. Okay, well, thank you and good evening. Nothing you'd like better to do on a nice warm night than to be here watching a slideshow. So thank you for your time. Devin Bradbury, one of your community members, is the project manager, and he's here with me tonight. So he's going to take a couple notes. There will be a point that I pause just to ask for some feedback. And I know the packet is thick. We'll go through quickly. I may not be as good at saying next page. So bear with me and we'll try to keep up. So the idea here is to give you some feedback on what's happened in the last 2 months as we've gone through this process. We did quite a bit of onboarding with your district, trying to understand what the needs were. You'll see a little bit of feedback from that. And then in a reciprocal fashion, we took folks from the district to several facilities, in addition to the 2 you've already seen, that we thought have some bearing on the kind of project that you're trying to do. So this is a timeline laid out, and we'll follow this timeline as we go through this. Immediately upon that approval at the end of March to move ahead, we jumped right into a kickoff meeting on April 3rd. And as soon as we did that, we immediately did some, now I'm on the next slide, did some very early programming, and that happened on April 15th. The idea behind the programming was just to try to legitimize the kinds of square footages that you saw as part of the programming process that you went through to get to your option 4. And in those, you can see 2 different drafts here. I'm on the next slide that has the programming items. There's kind of a lower end option, which doesn't mean that it would be a low end building. It means that it has a few less of the items in it that some of the items in the optimal option would have. And we found a range in square footage that we would probably be looking at between 332,000 and 357,000. So the 308 and 345,000 that were originally anticipated here are in line. And what's going to happen as the process goes forward is we'll make sure that all of these square footages start to work within the realm of what the district can afford. So that's really the first part of the process, and it was a good test to get us moving. The next thing that happened was we did a little bit of initial programming for the Farina Center, and what would happen if you tried to move the administrative folks out of that complex, and found somewhere in the neighborhood of 12,000 square feet worth of space would be needed for that. History tells us that if you do not put a boardroom in a facility like that and it's just an office structure, you can probably get to that square footage. What happens a lot if you try to merge the administrative complex and a high school or middle school project is you end up using one of the large group spaces or one of the multi-use spaces in the building as your boardroom. You're sitting in one right now. They're typically a little bit more organized for smaller collections of board, and then you go to an auditorium when you want to do what you're doing tonight. So you would have that opportunity, and that would be one of the shared spaces that a high school and an administrative complex would have. So again, building this background of what the square footages would be that you need for the building. The next thing that we did on April 17th was we set up what we call a virtual tour. And without having to put you through all of that, there's a slide after that that shows a map. This map shows probably, and we don't like to say bleeding edge, but some of the cutting edge high schools across the country that have done some great things. And this collection of buildings we got from our colleagues across the United States, and polled a number of them to say, if you had to show folks the next generation learning environments, which buildings would you choose? So in this case, this happens to be the buildings that our friends and colleagues selected, and we merely took folks on a photographic tour of those buildings to try to show people what those structures were like. In doing that, we then picked some buildings on the East Coast that had some similar features to the kinds of things that your colleague school districts are doing, as well as some of the things that we know that you're trying to do as a school district. So you'll see a little collection of those facilities in a moment. Next step was to get a little bit of an initiation into Worcester Township. And so we had a meeting on May 23rd with the township. And this is fairly small print, but what I'll tell you that this essentially says is they understand what you're trying to do. They understand what it is that we will have to go through as a process. What you see under zoning relief is very common zoning relief that we need in high school projects, actually in any secondary school project, because so many times a school project is not actually a permitted use because it falls under residential area. In your case, this falls into the AGR district, agricultural district, and so the facility would be a conditional use, which your building already is on this site. So we may have to go through a zoning process just to, or actually would be through a supervisor process to allow for the conditional use, but it is, again, a conditional permitted use within this district. And so it would be a matter of just going through the formalities of that. The challenges with all of the regulations that go along with zoning on a site like this include they would prefer that you keep the facility to 2-story. And what you folks have seen thus far are 3-story facilities for high schools lately. That's to try to keep the footprint of the building down. Impervious surface is always a challenge because so many people want to park on your sites these days. You all know that. And so that creates blacktop surface or hard impervious surface on the site. You have one unique zoning item. Most times when you have a building setback, you'll see that you're required to pull the building lines back a certain distance from the site. The intent there is to make sure that you're keeping your taller structures away from a closer residential structure. And in this case, you actually have a parking setback as well. So all of your parking lots have to be within that setback as well. So that's what the items up here mean. We did have a chat with the township about the idea of potentially a bus access on Mill Road. So that conversation has been put on the table as an idea. They know, and you know, that you're going to be pursuing public sanitary sewer connections. Right now, the civil engineer is working on the Grange Avenue pump station in Lower Providence. So all of the teams will start to work towards that as a solution. Stormwater design, as you probably know, on the site that you currently have is minimal, because stormwater design on our old projects was quite a bit less stringent than it is today. The goals today are to make sure that we don't create stormwater issues. And so you'll see a very significant change to that with a new project. And then the rest of this was about the process. They just like us to go through a traditional land development process as part of that. So great meeting. We know where we're heading, and we will start to submit as soon as we have an approved concept and site plan from you folks. We then went through and held, we recognized that the anchor points to whatever structure you build are going to be those larger portions of the building: performing arts, natatorium, athletics, physical education. Those are the big spaces. And so we thought we'd meet with at least that group of people. So the conversations evolved around several example projects that we shared that they seem to have the positive feedback for. So in your packet, you'll see auditoriums, and then I think it's phys ed and athletics, and then I think it's natatorium. So we shared several of the recent performing arts facilities that we've been doing in high schools. One of the strategies is to build them smaller so they're a little bit more intimate. And that way the student sitting on the stage does not feel like they're performing to an empty house. So you hold more performances, not bigger performances. And an example is you have a fairly large auditorium here. The old concept was you want to house the whole student body in one facility. That has moved to the gymnasium in general. So just a thought process as you folks go. This happens to be Springfield, Delaware County. The next one is the new Upper Marion facility. Those facilities all have balconies, and the balconies are meant to do a number of things. In this photo, you happen to see that the balcony doesn't have seating in it. It's actual space that can be used for multi-use. A folding partition folds across the front of that, and this thing can be used for athletics, can be used for cheerleading, can be used for small ensemble groups, it can be used for lecture hall. It's got all kinds of opportunities for use. Talked about music spaces for practice. We talked about this idea, and this photograph, I know I'm moving pretty quickly through the images though. This one happens to be the Phoenixville Middle School. If you turn yourself around in this facility, what you see are 3 tiers of seating. And so similar to the Upper Marion concept, what you're seeing is the body of seating at the ground and then the raked area at the back. Then you see green seats at the top, all with appropriate viewing angles. If you're up there and you pull the folding partition across, there's your seating, and then there it's not. And so the idea behind this is, rather than developing these giant spaces with tons of seating that gets used several times a year, it becomes a multi-use space that gives you opportunity every day. So these are the kinds of spaces that schools are looking at today to try to bring more multi-use to all of those spaces to use on a regular basis. Those were conversations that your team appreciated. Gymnasiums. There's conversations these days about whether you put that second story, we used to have to call it a walking area, but really it's an indoor track space. But what that indoor track space does, besides providing for the opportunities both for track and some of the actually allowing some field events to occur in the space in the wintertime, it provides that second tier of seating when you want to pull it all out for large competitions or to gather the entire student body. So again, the idea of multi-use spaces, that track is over all of the locker room spaces, and on the right-hand side over some of the seating areas in the common space. So you're using the bottom floor of that. It's not just wasted space. So more ideas that folks thought were good ideas. These are weight training spaces that go along with some of those, just conversations with your athletics and PE folks. The next one happens to be the cardio studio, the fitness room, more or less. And then as you go on, we then had conversations about training spaces, which are becoming more and more important as the students are actually practicing full years for things now. We're seeing more and more sports-related injuries as students are pushing themselves further and further. So this becomes an important part of everyone's activities. More of the strength training type spaces. And then finally, we talked with your swimming folks, your natatorium folks, about what they would like to see. Several of the facilities lately have been 8-lane pools. As you folks heard, as you began to discuss natatoriums and pools early on, the 8-lane is the true the true competition size pool these days. It allows them to run all of the events in the sequences that they need to. Viewing platforms is up on the right. And then one of the things that you continue to hear about are these moving bulkheads that give you the ability to stretch and shorten the pool to do all of the different things that you need to do in one vessel. So that happens to be Upper Merion's. The one that several of your folks really appreciated was the Central York pool, which is this one. This is very similar to Upper Merion. It has a little bit better seating capabilities up in that mezzanine area. So just some of the facilities that we looked at and that we gathered good information from your team on. So that gave us something to anchor this on. Next step. So then we decided from that virtual tour what we wanted to take some folks on tours for. And thank you to those of you who sat in the tight buses for the 2 straight days in long traffic-ridden trips. We appreciate that. Had a little bit of excitement in 1 or 2 spots, so that's good. We visited Meridian High School down in Falls Church School District. We also visited State College Area High School. For those of you who have not been up to that facility, it's worth seeing in Pennsylvania. The collection of imagery that we have quickly here is just to get all of you up to speed on the things that we know are going on in and around Pennsylvania. So it's 5 facilities. 4 of these your team has toured. You toured Upper Merion and Avon Grove earlier. We did not get to Springfield. So there are a few photos here for Springfield just to give you a sense of one of the things that we think might be interesting to your team. So this is a collection. This is why that's such a heavy packet. This is a collection of images that we took as people expressed interest in things as we rotated through the facilities. So I'm going to start with Upper Merion. And after this, I'm going to stop for a moment and just collect some ideas from you, and then we'll wrap it up. So Upper Merion, clearly, you know, it's one of the newer facilities in your county. It's one that many folks are touring. The interesting thing about this facility in the imagery that I have here is we had to do something very similar to what you're going to do, and that is we had an existing facility on the dirt area of the site in this image, built a new one directly adjacent to and connected to the middle school, and then took the old building down and replaced that with playing fields. The same kind of hopscotch game that we're going to have to play on your site here. In the end, this is the facility. You can see the incredible athletic complex that they have where the existing building used to be, and then you can see this great connection between the middle school and high school. The idea that Dr. Tolino had here was that someday it might not be middle school and high school. It might be more performance-based opportunities throughout the entire complex as to where students take classes and what kinds of classes they take. It's down the road, but he had some vision as to what that might be. Probably the most discussed part of this facility is that Central Commons. It serves dining, it serves the media center, it serves counseling, it serves administration, it serves performing arts at night, it serves athletics and the pool at night. We call this the 20-hour space because I think they only shut it down for 4 to 6 hours a day. The idea here is you don't have a dining space that's used 3 hours a day and then the rest of the day it's being cleaned up and set back up. You have a space that's used all the time for everything. So that's where that came from, and that was a pretty important site. We already talked to you about the auditorium in these images. We talked about some of the music spaces. We talked about the natatorium and the functions that that has. We talked about the gymnasium and the track. We talked about the fitness spaces. I'm stopping on an image that has the counseling center in the lower right-hand corner. The interesting thing about this, there's been conversation as we've toured several facilities about the size of the media center. So the media center at Upper Merion, or the library as you might call it, is actually a very large space, but it has the book collection in one room. And then you can actually move out into these multi-use spaces, which include that blue carpet and concrete space with all those breakout spaces. So this is a way to spread some of these functions out a little bit more into the learning resources and sharing those with the common space. So that's what that actually represents. People kind of see the book collection area and think that the media center is small. It's actually a whole collection of spaces. Food service, I think, is what you would expect today. These ideas are coming down from higher education. They're coming all the way down to the elementary schools today, but certainly in a high school facility, that's important. Not going to talk about the academic spaces, the learning stairs, and the teacher spaces, because I think there are some areas in other buildings that you had more interest in. But as a collective group, you need to know that lockers aren't used by kids today. So what's happening in most of these buildings is you're finding a very small locker bank for the students that brought too much that day. And the rest of the time, they just carry their backpack and have their coat on. And so the lockers have gone away from all of the corridors that we're used to and turned into locker banks. There's an image of several different types of learning spaces that don't look like the classrooms that I went to. These are the kinds of spaces that are allowing students to do all kinds of activities and share in very different ways than we shared in a 25 to 27 student classroom with the teacher facing us. It's just the next steps for education that are slowly finding their way into our schools. There's an image with 4 different classroom types, all kinds of different daylighting. And then there's an outdoor-indoor image. There's a whole series of stories to this, but I won't talk about this one because we're going to talk about state colleges down the road. The building that folks here did not see is the second project in here, and that's Springfield High School, Delaware County. In that project, the building moved right towards the main street that I forget the name of and feel bad about that in Springfield. But the idea here is that that facility has a performing arts center with a very, very bright entry point to really mark that entry right from the town's center. The idea is people will go to dinner in town and walk right to the performance. That was kind of the idea. I'll go back to the athletics in a second. The image of the site here has the old high school and a baseball field on the right that eventually became the new facility. So you can see in a site plan the idea where this site has many similarities to yours. It was a very tight site and difficult to work with, but you can see the new stadium and where we put the new stadium and then where the new facility went. I'm setting you up here. We actually had to take the gymnasium in the lower left-hand corner of the hatched area down before we could build the stadium. So they lost use of a gymnasium for a year just to make sure that we could get the building and the stadium built, and then everybody moved to the new building. So as we were building it, you can see here, this is when we started to take down the old gymnasium in the lower left-hand corner while the new building and the new stadium were underway. The point being made is we may have to talk about a small area getting taken down at some point just to allow the kinds of circulation during construction that you need. So we'll talk very deeply with you about that before any decisions are made to do that. And then ultimately, the site plan as you see it today with the old building gone, the new building on the right-hand side directly adjacent to town, and the stadium. So there's some photos of the building with its core cut down the center. There's a big courtyard there, and the reason we wanted to show this project to people was because you also saw Avangrove's courtyards and thought that was pretty attractive as internal spaces. So the same thing was done in the Springfield facility, and it offers another opportunity for people to look at that kind of space. The athletic facilities here, I'm on a track image, which is the backside of the high school. But what the backside creates is, it's called Cougar Alley, and it leads right down. This is an image with the landscaping on the right, the bleachers on the left. It leads right down to the gymnasium. So there really is no back door. There's kind of a cool Cougar Alley that leads down the way here to a glass area in the back that leads right into the gymnasium. So lots of cool features related to how you connect the building to the community, connect the building to all of its site-related functions. There's an image of the inside of the entry lobby directly adjacent to the Performing Arts Center. There's a second floor connection point here just showing you that. I went right to the auditorium that I shared with you earlier and to the music practice areas, the band and vocal spaces, which are similar in many ways to Upper Merion's and were similar to what you guys saw in other buildings. There is a common space at the back of the Springfield High School building that is located directly adjacent to both the stadium and to the gymnasiums. And the intent of this space, besides sharing the library media center on the second floor, is to connect all of that to the sports function so that can open at night. They can close down the academic areas, and this serves as the indoor-outdoor food service, concessions, and all of that. Directly to the left in this image, though, is the courtyard. And so it has some similarities to what you saw on in Avongrove. So this is a central space. All of the classrooms are clustered around it, and students use this daily to pass back and forth without going through the corridors. So what we all know as a building that would have a corridor on one side with classrooms and a corridor on the other, it actually has three because it has this courtyard space that students circulate through regularly to get from one side of the building to the other. Again, a 3-story building. Should have said that about Upper Merion as well. Just some of the classrooms and the daylighting and so on. So it's worth folks taking a look at that one for that courtyard function. We took a trip to Meridian High School. We have taken 3 school districts to this facility, and I think everybody comes away with the same appreciation for the facility. It's not over the top. It's not ostentatious. It does a good job of really looking at kind of next generation learning spaces. So quick one on Meridian High School here. There's a great story to what they did with this site. Ultimately, the idea was this will be unique to us in this region, was they were able to offer development opportunities on that site that ultimately offset their debt service. So that's pretty cool because right now they're actually building the buildings. The developers are building the buildings directly across the street from this that are truly offsetting the debt service. Very unique solution. Somebody had some great forethought to come up with that idea. This aerial photograph, though, you can see the high school on the left-hand side and its playing fields. The buildings on the right all sit in the footprint of the old school that was on this site. So they offered that area up, and that has essentially paid for, as I said, the debt service. So as you walk into this building, one of the things that you see, and that I think all of you will appreciate in a new building, are graphics and identity. So this really has a great connection to the region, to the city, to Falls Church, and really to the world. There's a world map up there that they told us as we walked by. Some of the boundaries of some of the countries have already shifted just since they built that. So maybe that should have been done digitally. But regardless, it gives you an idea of some of the branding and graphics that go on through a building. We learn something new every day. And so this auditorium, built in the same kind of capacity as the 2 others I've shown you so far, functions like a full fly loft in that you can change the scene sets just like you could pull a full fly directly up like we have in so many of our high schools in this region, but it's done digitally. So we've never seen that before. We want to go see this baby function because if it can do the kinds of things that our stage sets do that we're all used to, it's a great solution to not having to build a full fly height, which means double the space of the height of the proscenium, as you know. Their dining space was a little bit lower, a little bit less volumetric, and slightly less connected to some of the other spaces, but it is directly adjacent to the gym and the auditorium. So it does provide them that capability of multi-use day and night. The building on the second floor, directly adjacent to the media center, had a really cool coffee bar. Like what you guys are trying to do, this, of course, almost looks very branded. And we walked into the media center and library, and I think people had a little bit better connection to the size of the library here. And it had all of the functions. It had small group breakout. It had educational space for full classes of students, had computer space, and it had quite a collection of books. So it's a little bit larger. Looked a little bit more like what I think people were envisioning the library in a high school to be. And these are the things we learn as we walk around with you, the kinds of things that we think you're trying to do. There were some volumetric spaces like on the right that everybody thought was a little bit grandiose. That's directly next to the gymnasiums. But they too had a second floor track. In their case, they did it on their auxiliary gym. So they weren't trying to add capacity to a main gymnasium to allow very large seating. They were really trying to build a track. So that was kind of interesting to us. Just the collection of trophy cases and so on. They had the controversial conversation is, does a learning stair work and does it contribute to learning? There are districts that will say that they do. There are districts that say that they don't. In this case, they had a centrally located learning stair that they claim people are on all day, every day. I will tell you the photographs look very austere because the seniors had graduated and we had just a few students left in the building. So please don't take the lack of students in this as any reflection on who does and does not use that. Great communal space though. One of the interesting things that is a discussion amongst every district that we talk to today are the idea of a little bit more gender equity, gender neutral type bathrooms. This one had those collection of individual stalls on either side and a shared sink area in the front. Everything is directly visually accessible to all of the learning spaces, so you don't have anything go on in there that you don't want going on in there. So it was a good example for all of us of how some of these are being built. We have some buildings underway with these right now, but we don't have finished versions with this. So it was good to see it in action and to hear whether it works or not for the district. These areas were the central areas in between the classrooms. And so what you get is a very small locker bank, learning area out in the open outside of the classrooms for students, and then the glass area halfway down is a small group or larger group type quiet space to work, like an outdoor classroom or an out of the area classroom. I don't mean outdoor. But this was a pretty good way for us to understand some other ways of learning for students, and then the classrooms were smaller, contributing the square footage back to these areas. I think I have been here on days when this thing is full and packed and students are working in there like they'd work in a college commons. It's very heavily used and has great views and does all of the things that many of us would like to be in when we go to learn or try to do our projects. And I just had a whole series of photos on the different floors of these different types of spaces. In this building, the theming per floor, this happened to be a 7-story building, believe it or not. The theming on each floor as you moved up and through brought color into each of those, but then the color was related to where you were in the building. Sky, water, all of these different things were being brought back as themes. Just another photo of locker banks and small group spaces. Some of the theming behind the graphics, or graphics behind the theming. And then there was one other 2-story space in the building to connect some of the classroom structures, and that's what this image is showing. This is, I believe this is an underclassmen area because the students were still here. They were still collecting in that space. And this is probably being used the way that the rest of the spaces we've seen used as we've gone back and forth to this building. The building had some space that's to be adapted as new classrooms in the future that right now is being used as large group space. That's kind of the Funkadelic orange in the back there. That's kind of a large teaming space. And then they had an area that was an outdoor green roof area, and the big silver items down the center are solar tubes to bring daylighting down into the building, so they need a lot less artificial lighting and a lot more of the solar tube natural lighting down through. So some sustainable techniques. As we've brought people to this building, some of in this building are kind of exemplary, and we've all taken notes from these over time. I think everybody learned a little bit there. And then we finally progressed down to the basement, which had all of the music spaces, the athletic spaces, the training spaces, and so on. And that's what the next set of images are. More graphics and more connection back to the building's branding. and then finally back up to the dining space. Just a photograph from across the playing field of what this building looks like from the backside, if you're looking at the one that looks across the multipurpose stadium space. And for you to read, not for me to go through here, but we made sure that we collected as a team and discussed the positive reactions to each of these buildings, Meridian High School, and then some of the concerns. It's definitely worth you guys all reading these and taking a look. It's very consistent with all of the work that you've done to date, all of those different meetings that you've held, and it was good to see that there's a lot of consistency in the thought process. I'll go quickly through the next two. I hope State College Area High School was a great tour. State College is a mostly new building with some renovation, very large facility, at least 2 times the size of what you're trying to build. 3 stories. And the aerial photograph is pretty interesting because it shows you that there is a kind of a vertebrae that runs through the center of the building. The lower part of that image is the bus drop-off area. The upper part was intended to be where the parents dropped off, although I'm sure with traffic patterns, they've found that they've been overwhelmed by that as well, just like most schools do get overwhelmed by it. 4 basic pods of classrooms. The 3 on the right are traditional classroom structures. The one on the left also has their CTE program in the base. So that's something that you're not necessarily doing that they've decided to incorporate into their facility. It was built while the whole high school was occupied. This was a pirouette, I can tell you that. This was a very unique project. And again, we didn't do this one. This is just one that I watched get built because it was so important to all of us who are watching high schools get built in the region. This is that connector point from the front part of the building to the back. It has, I will just say that straight ahead and to the right is a space that your folks really thought was quite good. That was the Commons, and I'm going to share that in a moment. But directly adjacent to that spot was the auditorium. The auditorium is a very fixed space, and I think that even the superintendent of State College mentioned that if he had a little bit more flexibility, perhaps with the balcony area, he could use some of this a little bit more regularly. So it was a good comment to hear, just to know that we build things and we always have to hear some feedback to understand how they could work better. This is just a connector point to the library, very nicely daylit. And when you turn around from there, this was the space. It's an orange photo, so bear with the color. That didn't come out as well as it could have. But this is a huge connector space. It's halfway in between the bus drop-off and the parent drop-off. It's the everything space. It connects to the media center. It connects to the performing arts area, to the dining space. There's a school store behind us. There's a coffee shop behind us in the image. I think I have some of those. Small group space overlooking that. And then the library itself, it was pretty compact. It's mostly the collection because people do the same thing. They take all of their learning and all of their activities and go out into that common space. And this area is generally meant for the circulation of the books. So it gives you a good sense of the different ways people are looking at libraries and collections today. They reused their existing auditorium in a renovation. So I shared with you the new auditorium that was built. This is the old auditorium that was renovated in the facility and serves as a large group space and a smaller performance space for the facility. Interesting comment was this could serve more as an LGI space if they put tablet arms on some of these. Being in State College, they see a number of the large group spaces on campus, and probably a natural thought process that that's what we do with our large group spaces. I don't know that we do that quite as much in southeastern PA as they do there at Penn State University Park. A great culinary arts program in there, incredible facilities for students to learn there. Now, again, remember, this is part of a CTE program, so it's more dynamic, a little bit bigger than we would probably see in a typical family consumer science type program. We didn't get to see the big competition gym. We saw smaller gyms, but they had a variety of floor types and climbing walls and all of those good things. So they had plenty of PE spaces to support the program. And then they had a really great fitness and weight room, strength training room that in the end also overlooked the playing fields. So that's what those variety of images are there. The counseling center was a lot like the counseling center that we have put into Upper Merion. It's a very open, free space that offers all of the college, career choice, and so on spaces, as well as counseling services. So a lot of activity would be going on there in any normal day. We caught this building on the day after the last day of seniors leaving the school. So again, 2 buildings that we landed on the day after the students left. So that was a shame. The dining space is a combination of renovation to the old facility and addition. And they've done a really nice job of branding it. A little bit lower ceiling height. You can kind of look at this versus some of the other facilities you saw. But really great dynamic seating areas that are more in keeping with what the next generation of food service is. It's more of a dining type space, collegiate type space than it is simply straight tables and chairs and so on. Each of those, by the way, each of those tables has plugs for USB and traditional plugs. The intent there is the students pull up and actually do work or work on their computers, or in some cases, I'm sure they're surfing. But bottom line is they're mixing that plus food and doing the things that you folks do when you go for lunch break. There was an outdoor amphitheater that they use pretty regularly, and part of the reason this works so nicely is because right up above you can actually see the umbrellas for the lunch tables. It's directly outside of the lunch space, and during any given day, students apparently flow out into this space regularly. So this is that great indoor-outdoor connection. And for you guys, with some of the views that you have from this site, I could see something like this being just an amazing space for you to connect back to that incredible view and vista you have. Visual Arts was a nice collection of spaces in this building. Just gives you a sense of the art studios. They had a great stage and scene set shop right behind the stage. And then the photo on the right in this case is the central core of the art space. And there were more students actually in this space than there were in some of the art rooms. So that was kind of cool to see the students gravitate towards that program, all feeling at home in that area. That was kind of neat. Just some of the performance, the music spaces. You see one with just a stage setup and one with the actual bleachers or stands, choral stands set up. And then they had a black box theater and a variety of comments about how it's used, when it's used. But in this case, it's mixed with dance performance. And so they had the bars and the mirrors on the one wall. And then, of course, you pull the curtains all the way around and you can completely control the acoustics, change all the lights out with the different sets up above. So, and then finally the classroom spaces, and we're hopefully getting to an end here, but there were always teaming spaces outside of that area, kind of comfortable spots. Classrooms were a little bit larger than some of the other spaces that we saw. So size of classroom is going to be important as we talk to you guys a little bit further about that. Flexibility of the furniture. This happened to be set up in a true lecture environment, but they're all on wheels. They can all move. I forgot one thing about the Meridian project. They had a unique furniture setup in that they not only were they on wheels, but they went up and down. And so a lot of the rooms were set up almost in a mini amphitheater. So the students in the back sat up on taller chairs at taller desks. Students in the front sat on the lower desks, lower chairs, so you could all see down and over each other and set up any kind of learning that you wanted to. There was a common space in each of these clusters of classrooms that in some cases in this building had already been converted to classroom spaces because they have continued to grow that fast. So some of the spaces that were seen as multiple group spaces have already been allocated for classroom spaces. There was a little bit more fixed, almost debate style space. You might look at this and say, I can tell I'm in University Park because it looks like a space that would be on campus. That's exactly what this was intended to do. I don't know that it's as flexible as some of the other spaces that you have seen, but it's a beautiful space. Just a quick look at the aquaponics space They built in a great space for it, and then the story was the teacher left, and so the program went away, but the space is still there. So conversations for everybody as time goes on. And then just some views of what the 3-story structure looks like on the landscape. So positive reactions, again, for you to take a look at, some of the concerns, and then just general comments that people had as we went. We didn't go on the Avon Grove High School tour. Some of you did. What we tried to do, though, was collect a little bit of the imagery from what we heard that folks liked. So I go right past the beautiful exterior and look a little bit at the aerial photo, which shows 2 courtyards. And we understand there was some good feedback and favorable feedback for the courtyards. Those courtyards were nicely designed with student spaces directly, indoor student spaces directly adjacent to those. And you guys will learn as you look more and more at these facilities that furniture today is everything. That's how we make the spaces, great furniture. And that's what you're seeing in this photo. And it's connected directly to that outdoor space. There's the outdoor space. And I know people like the idea of being able to connect that second floor to the ground floor to this courtyard. Probably an advantage over the Springfield project, which didn't have the connections. You had to pass through stairwells to get down to this. One more time, a 3-story academic facility. So just kind of a little bit of a setup there, folks. And within nice connection spaces between media center and classroom clusters and the indoor-outdoor spaces. And in this case, you're seeing several of the different learning type spaces all in one area. So you see that learning stair concept. The red box is a small group instruction space, so students can gather in there and do team and group projects. And then kind of that loungy type space directly underneath that. So it's a good depiction of all of the different types of spaces that we typically are trying to build into these buildings. And finally, a very grand auditorium, clearly an important space in the Avon Grove structure. And I do remember from back when everybody was going after this project, the importance of performing arts to these folks. So I understand where that came from. And finally, their gymnasium. That does not have the second tier track. Instead, what they've done is they've done very tall bleacher structures to accommodate what they want to have as a collection of people in one competition there. So I'll just hit this real quick, and then I would love some feedback on some of the slides and images you saw. We then held a sustainability meeting to talk about all of the different ways to rank sustainability in a project, a number of the different ways that you could approach that. We landed on one project that we've recently been able to get LEED Gold for, which is Community College of Philadelphia Career and Technology Center. And what you're seeing on this image is a scorecard for LEED to show all of the different areas that you have to be looking at sustainability through. That project ranked very highly from that perspective. It is an urban project, and urban projects immediately do better on the LEED spectrum than do projects in the suburbs and in the more rural areas. Reason being, you've got transportation complexes set up there. You're immediately trying to develop your building to be a better building from a stormwater management structure standpoint, because they can't contribute anymore to their stormwater management and they have no room to put it. And the building itself was a very efficient structure. And so for those reasons, plus all of the urban reasons, this building achieved LEED Gold, not with difficulty. The one item that we did have to put on this project in the image that you see here is a green roof. The green roof actually substitutes as a stormwater management for what would be grass and grade if that building were not there. So that's the way that the Philadelphia Water Department is dealing with a lot of their stormwater management issues by making projects like this green roof structures. So that just gives you an idea. Last, we have started, we have some ideas generated for this site just to understand how things fit. But for you folks today, as your precursor, We want to understand what is developable and what is not. And we have one thing missing on this. The thing that's missing on this is the 250-foot setback. So take the football field that you see in the right-hand corner here, subtract 50 feet from it, and turn it so that it runs around every edge of that site that you see. And you can see that your site gets sucked in pretty substantially just by running that football field around the side of the site. So we have to build and we have to put parking 250 feet back. You notice your existing building is not 250 feet from the property line. You also notice that quite a bit of your parking's not, because it was done prior probably to those zoning ordinances being enacted. So when we look at the site, and I think how you look at the site is that you've got, bear with me, you've got an existing building, you've got your transportation center, the stadium, the turf multipurpose field, Warriors Field on the corner of Germantown and Kriebel Mill is in an important spot and a great set of viewpoints. We know where your current access points are. We'd certainly like the opportunity to use Mill Road, even if it's for bus circulation. So that was the point that we brought up with the township, and we have to see where that goes. But immediately, you begin to look at things that are off limits to your development. Transportation center is where it is. That's going to stay. Your stadium is pretty much a fixed spot on that site, and I suspect you don't want us taking the stadium down and rebuilding that. Your multi-purpose field is a turf field, so you've put quite a bit of time and money into that, and it appears that the baseball stadium is probably off limits. So the high school is only off limits because you have to build so you can move the students there, so you can take it down and put other things in its place. And so when you look at, one last thing, the dashes that run kind of left and then zigzag down to the right are big drops on the site, and they're typically 10 to 15 foot drops. So every one of those is equal to a story. So if you look at the way that you might orient a building on this site, you can see you've got entire story drops, 15-foot drops from one area to the next as you hop down the site. And there's actually another one we all realized by your JV baseball field on the upper right-hand corner. So that's one more big drop. So when we start to talk to you, we're going to be talking about development area 1, which is this area on the upper left-hand corner in yellow. And we will probably also talk to you about the area closer to Kriebel Mill Road, which is area 2. So it's interesting, and I'm sure you've already thought about this, those are the spots to build. You have to think about how your circulation on the site, your circulation back and forth, can actually allow you to put a building in these areas. And you have one more challenge as you go through this, and that is your circulation while you're building the building. So these are all the things that we're going to talk to you about as you go forth. That's what we've been doing for the last 2 months. I would invite feedback from anybody on the tours. Were there things that were interesting to you or not? And anything else that you have questions for us on?
Yeah, I had a question. I know I went on the tours, and one of the buildings, I forget which one it was actually like in the actual like terrain, like it was in the hill. And so it kind of showed 2 stories, but it was like they had 1 floor underground. I know you've only started talking to Worcester about the zoning and the 2 floors, because I was really hoping that we can go up 3 floors to really be able to provide everything that we need to do. So was that a possibility also, or was that ever like kind of discussed, even though it wasn't something we had brought to you yet?
Yes, thank you. That's a good point. So when I have talked several times here about the concern of 3rd floor, it only means that you have to go through the zoning process for it. That's all. And traditionally, when people understand the compaction of footprint, which means more ability for playing fields and for parking on the site, they get more and more excited about a smaller, compact footprint and a 3-story height. So we tend to hear, as long as we're being careful about where it's located, that we end up having the allowance to do that, but we do have to go through the formal process.
Thank you.
I just
Yes.
have,
You know what I'll do? I'll call people's names to make it easier. Ms. Purdue?
I just have a quick question in reference to I had a question about the number of floors also. Do you plan to engage? I know you have, I think in your last point, you do plan to go back or something about target approximately February 2025. When is the next time? Is that the next time you plan to engage with them?
So we're actually going to do this fall. So the idea here, and that's the second bullet up, the idea here is we first get some understanding of what it is you'd like to do on the site, and then we'll take that idea into them in the early fall. So there's going to be a continued dialogue between early fall right through February. And the intent of that last bullet is we'd actually like to start the land development process in February, which is the formalized process to go through the township approvals.
Okay. Ms. Steele?
Hi, thank you for this. It was really informative. I appreciate it. I just have a quick question.
Mhm.
The natatoriums that you showed us, it's okay if this isn't included. Some of them looked like long course pools or 50-meter pools that then were broken up with those, and I'm going to use the word that's wrong, but the meter, like the divider thing. What was included? Was any of that taken into consideration with the square footage or no?
Yes,
Yes.
yes.
So if 50, sorry, go ahead.
No, so the square footages that you are seeing are almost equitable to those original square footages that your team came up with, including the natatorium. So right now, those are in the bigger square footage. It's just a question of how big you build it. To your first question, those are not 50-meter pools. Yeah, the 50-meter pool, we just don't see that at the high school level. They have the movable bulkheads, so they basically allow for the 25 meters plus a practice zone right beyond that.
That makes total sense. Thanks.
Yeah.
I wanted to
Yep.
make sure I knew what I was saying. Thanks.
Ms. Alston?
Thank you very much. Proud Springfield High School Delco alum here.
Way to go.
And so I do hope we get to see that. And
Yes.
that was that building moved from Leamy to Saxer Avenue.
Thank
which is,
you.
Yes, you're welcome,
Saxer.
which is downtown Springfield. So I do hope we get to see that. But I was just wondering if I could request to accompany all this information, the student body count of these different districts, as well as staff, just so we can help contextualize the amount of people who are in these buildings, in relation to the space of the facilities.
Perfect.
Thank you.
So as you know, Springfield actually right now I think it's at 1,600. So it's very close to what yours is. We actually originally built it for 1,400 with a swing space that was not supposed to be used for some time, but build it and they shall come. It moved right up to the 1,550 and we built those spaces out. Upper Marion is 1,550 to 1,600, and I believe Avon Grove is the same size. So 3 of the 5 buildings you saw were similar to what you're trying to do.
Ms. Clary?
Hi. I wanted to talk a little bit about the slide where you have the development areas. I just wanted to better understand the slides. So I understand where development area 1 is. Development area 2, to me, looks like where the current entrance of the school is, kind of in between where the admin building is and then the grass of the high school. Is that accurate?
It is.
Okay. So you're talking about either area number 1 or area number 2. Is that right?
It could even be a combination of the two.
Okay, that's where I was going next.
Yep.
And how does I heard you say, I was trying to figure out the 250 setback, and then you said some of our parking and some of our school is actually in today's standards would be in violation. So will our existing parking areas, is there a chance that those could be grandfathered in by Worcester, or do you envision us having to completely comply? And because that's leading me to questions about development too, is where
Yeah.
I'm kind of going.
There's a very significant process that occurs between the attorneys, the civil engineers, the planning commission, the supervisors, and our entire team, which includes you, to go through this process and negotiate all of this. So the reason that I mentioned that the existing building and existing parking are within the setback is because so many of our high school buildings were built prior to the zoning codes being enacted around them. And they were then put in place, and you only have to comply when you pull those up and rebuild them. So there is an opportunity in some cases to preserve parking that sits in those areas, and you may very well be granted that, but I can't say that sitting here until you've gone through the process.
Oh, I totally
Yep.
understand that. I can appreciate that.
Yep.
Okay, and then the last comment I have, even though I didn't go on the last tours you were on, I was on the tours of the 3 schools prior, and you asked for some feedback, and I would just tell you that for me personally, I'm just one of many, the outdoor space at Avon Grove that you didn't have necessarily a picture of, but are very important to me. I think I wasn't necessarily liking the picture that I saw. I think was it Springfield that
Probably.
you guys? It seemed more like a walkway where at Avon Grove, it was like usable space for whether it was for lunch or teachers or even outdoor classrooms, which I think is really cool and probably very forward thinking. So that's all I
Thank
have.
you. That's good.
Mr. Winters?
Yeah, again, thank you. I want to just highlight a couple of things that being a part of the tours and maybe so many pictures of the building is not expressing, but every conversation and every place that we went in these buildings was about educational usage and how it's being used, how it could be used more effectively. Is it being used to grow the programs, how the programs were developed? The example where they have, I guess it was at State College where the teacher is retired, but now they don't. So the point related to you can't build it around a teacher, you have to build it around a program. So my concern is somebody seeing this 160 slides or whatever it is, and it's all about the building. Every single one of the conversations we were having was around the proper usage of the educational development at the high school. So really and that was from you and Dr. Zerbe's leadership and Dr. Euchre. We did see that some facilities were reused. I guess at State College, they use it for a different type of school. So certainly that's something I'm interested to see especially if we can get grandfathered with, the LGI building or whatever, to be used in something else or a gymnasium to be used again. Certainly interested in the possibility of Mill Road because I believe that is really the only way that this possibly could be done, honestly, is to get the buses going in a different direction or at least have the buses not cut off from the potential. That which you're already doing and discussing tremendously was the flexibility of the spaces, seeing how space could be used more than just a 2-hour time slot during the day and trying to approach those Upper Merion 20 hours. The one question I have, you definitely don't have to answer in exactness, but the footprint that you see in these overheads shows a much smaller footprint in all these districts because they've gone from a spread out district to 3, sometimes more floors. And when we're talking about the requirements for Worcester at 2.5 stories, can you estimate the cost differential for going up as opposed to going out?
In this case, so there have been a lot of studies about how that works and where the cost differentials are. And it's a difference between the building envelope that you're building versus the circulation areas within, because you get more vertical circulation for 3 versus 2. My suspicion is from a cost perspective, you will see little difference between a 2 and a 3 story. I mean, you're probably talking $1 million plus, $1 million minus, which in the grand scheme of the dollars you're talking about is not going to affect you. The effect is the parking area, the playing field area, and all of the outdoor spaces that you need to squeeze onto this site. And I don't mean to say squeeze, but every high school site today is a squeeze. We're always trying to build on that site while students are in session in the existing building. So I think that's going to be the bigger affect than the cost is in this case.
So some of the conversations we had on the trip was that as the elevation goes down, you could potentially have something at the bottom that might be 3.5, 4 stories high, but it still meets the requirement because the total height of the top part of the building is still under the 2.5. Is that, am I taking that literally, or does that have to be below ground?
No, that's a reasonable interpretation. A number of codes actually talk about mean grade, meaning that the high and the low averaged, and that becomes the differential between that and the roof height. We'll get the civil engineers to do that research. I don't know what Worcester's calculation is based on, but you're right, that could contribute to the 2.5 stories actually working in this case, because you could get 3 down below and 2 as you come up the hillside. So more research to be done.
And hopefully Worcester understands the principle of maybe there's not enough differentiation in the 2 to 3, but the 2 to 4 could be $3 or $4 or $5 million of savings, which is certainly significant. And then the other point I just wanted to make that Dr. Euchre and Dr. Zerbe and Dr. Regina, everybody, Dr. Sagini, is the autonomy of our students and how we're going to deliver the educational model. Going back to the first point, is all these flexible spaces. The one thing you didn't point out necessarily for Meridian and Falls Church is that they're an IB school, so the delivery of and the flexibility that we're giving our students and how we're going to be able to develop an environment to deliver that in the most effective way. And I know Upper Merion has said the students have embraced the freedom and with a maturity level. I think it's that as part of the educational choices that we're making is really critical for understanding on how we're going to move forward with all this flexibility, collaboration spaces, pulling out, doing lots of 21st century stuff, but we also have to be able to deliver it, not just have an environment that could have it. Because I believe there were some examples where they had to pull back on some examples where the freedom, I don't remember where it was, but the freedom in certain areas was too much. And they had to, even though they designed the building that way, they couldn't offer it as a complete, as it was designed. So I spoke a lot. Thank you very much.
Just a real quick comment before we move on. The most important point here is that we tried not to show flashy exterior photos. The only reason we showed one for each was so you knew what the context of that building was. It has nothing to do with what goes on within it. The main goal that we're all looking forward to is exactly what you said, which is creating those spaces for those things to happen. Part of the reason why we were a little sad to go to at least 2 of the buildings with students who had already moved on as seniors, because seeing the way that these things are lived in is going to give us the best feeling for the next generation. So thank you for that comment, because that's what we're all aiming at.
Yeah, I wanted to share my perspective on the tours that I went to and kind of like just giving you my feedback of what I'd like to see when you start to create your designs as our next step. I do feel like this school district is a community that is used often. I would say 20 hours, just like you're saying there. And so what I really appreciated was when they had that open space of community entrance. It was I really would love to see an image on one side, really creating the auditorium. So you have your performing arts and your music all there, along with your other art type of programming, like your pottery and creative ed, like kind of your artistic views, that they can actually have an art gallery. And so when you're there, people really could use that community space to have like the families there, enjoy food. We always have receptions. We're always gathering there. So really creating an art type of area that way. And then on the other end, what I really loved was having a space for the health and fitness and allowing an opportunity for them to come and go, because we really everyone in our community does use our gyms. It's not just used by the high school, it's used by everyone in the, younger groups all the way up. So really kind of seeing a health and fitness center for all students. But then what I really liked, which we didn't talk really about, was the steel. There was definitely an opportunity where we had an area where you can open up the garage door and allow what we're trying to achieve here with our new steel standards, an opportunity for them to do the woodworking and the computer tech and the different things that the fab lab that we were trying to put in. So that was a really great thing. And that was actually like on a cliff where you can open up the door. And since we have these like automotive clubs that we have, we could really, really explore other opportunities to use that space. But what I liked also was definitely creating the teaching environment that Paul referred to. What we have now currently is teachers are teaching all over our buildings, all throughout, and it's very expanded, way too expanded. Like you got a math teacher here and a math teacher there, and they don't have opportunity to collaborate. What I loved seeing was that you've got that collaborative space for all the teachers, and then you've got your math, and then you've got your science collaboration. Then you've got your ELA collaboration. So it allowed students from 9th through 12th grade to be there mixed into what their abilities are. So I really loved that collaborative spaces that we don't have currently. And of course, I always plug in special education. I don't want it down a hallway separately in any way. I want it really to be involved in the community, so that we really have the life skills. I've really enjoyed seeing that. I think it's an opportunity for an apartment type setting. These are things that I definitely would love to see. I'm curious with the development of Area 1, is that enough square footage for what we are saying if we do decide to build? Because number 2 looks a little bit smaller.
It's tight. Area 1 does allow you a building, plus it allows parking. It fits. We've tested it a few times in different ways to see how it works. So I think the slight setup here is if we get a configuration that means something to all of us and works for all of the things. I always say the 95% rule. So works for 95% of the things that we're looking to achieve. If we have to take a small portion of the building down in order to still allow circulation and things like that to happen, I just want that to be out there as an idea that we can discuss or find another way around. So it does fit. The program, both site and building and parking, fits. So it's just a question of where and how do we get all of the things that you want to achieve.
Yeah. And I guess going with Paul said too, like our gymnasium is in great condition. And I don't know, when you look at tearing the whole building down, keeping part of it, I don't know what that looks like and what your thoughts are on that, because you've seen our buildings. HVAC was a big issue for us. And so for us to put in a new HVAC and still have the same walls, it's still this educational environment that's not what we want for the future. I'm not sure if it's really worth it for us to keep a gymnasium or a component of the LGI of the high school if we're able to really build new and get what we need if we could afford it financially, of course. So, no, the last thing I would say is definitely the driving and access in and out is really important. I saw like in Upper Marion how well that was, where it went all the way around the building, an opportunity for the student drivers to park, staff to park, and drop off is just really big here. It is a big safety issue on all the main streets. You can't come and go without at least a 15 to 20 minute wait on any of the streets, whether it be the side streets or the main street of Germantown. So that exit and entry is really important.
Right. No doubt.
Ms. Purdue.
I just have a few, and I'm going to start off on, just because I saw it on the Worcester supervisor's discussion as far as the bus, and it's something that I will hope we can get a little bit more information on exactly what was discussed in what capacity and what the thoughts are in reference to that, because as Ms. Kanko mentioned, traffic is a big problem here on this campus. So it's something we're hoping construction will help remedy, but it's something that I know is important to all of us here, whether you have kids directly in the district or you drive through here early in the morning, so or even in the evening. I had a few points, and I think Ms. Austin asked for, in reference to the schools that we toured, if we're adding additional information in reference to the capacity, like the number of students and everything else, I think it would be nice. I hate to ask you to go through all the slides, but if we can just get a summary from each of the schools, the capacity. I was interested in, if, I think we said like the buildings are nice, but really highlighting the educational components of what having the learning stairs have, and what, based on the tours, what items they have and what the educational purposes are. And to me also, I think it would be nice to also list out how many floors there are, just because if I pick this up, a lot of people are on vacation now. When they pick it up, it would be nice to be able to look through and have a comprehensive information on how many floors, how big the space is, the number of students served. I think that may be important if we want to have a comparison. Another thing also, because to me, this slide is what matters a lot for us also. And when I look at what's off limits, there's things behind it based on, I know one is like the Warrior Stadium, but there's other items that it's not clear. So if someone is not familiar and they're wondering what's there, they can't see that. So I don't know if there's a way that this can be modified a little bit so you can see the off limits, what's behind there. I think that would be important for me also.
Okay.
And then maybe, I don't know if when we talk about development area 1 and 2, if we can put their dimensions also.
Not going to do that.
Okay.
But what I will show you is the area that you can build within that and not. Those are going to evolve. Those
Okay.
are going to become some of the things that generate the building concepts. So you'll start to see that really work. And
Okay.
everything that you just asked will start to get depicted and slowly morph into a site and a building.
Okay.
So I think it'll be fun for you to watch. But
Yeah, no,
always
it's
challenging.
definitely, I think it'll be great, but I'm just wondering, someone don't have access to it, but
Yeah.
we'll be working with you closely, so we'll
You
see
will.
it.
I
Yeah.
look forward to.
Thank you.
One real quick reaction.
Mhm.
3 of the buildings that we saw are almost the same student quantity, is a student population. The 2 exceptions were Meridian and State College. So those are 2 different student populations. All of the buildings except for Meridian were 3-story buildings. So all 4 of those were 3-story. So, but I like your concept. I think it will help a lot of folks to have some of those specifics in these descriptions. So happy to do that.
Ms. Thiel.
Hi, just a few more questions. You said State College was a CDE program. What does that stand for?
Yeah, so it has a career and technology education program.
Thank you. So
Yes.
CTE.
I
That
should
makes more
stop
sense.
using acronyms.
No,
I'm
that's
sorry.
fine. Thank you. I actually want, my first question is, on the first, on these slides again. The administration relocation and the buildings are separate. We had previously talked about possibly having them in the same building. I guess we're looking at
Mhm.
both. Can you explain, was that a discussion? Was that not a discussion?
No, no, no.
Maybe I
That's,
misunderstood.
this
They're
is
separate?
this is way before you get into that conversation. It's just
Okay.
trying to identify the needs of each. If you can merge the 2, super.
So then I would be looking at this and thinking, if say my brain were to say, well, what would it be like if we merged the 2? Perhaps I should, and I know that this is not what actually happened. Would I take that 11,000 and add that to the 332,000? Is that a rough thing that my brain should do?
That's
Or no?
probably, so you're asking if that's logical. The answer is that's probably the first set of logic. And then
Okay.
what we really need to do with that building program is to turn it into your real building program. What
Right.
we did was a test drive of it to say, what would a traditional building of this size be? And that's about where it ended up. And we did that through about 14 pages worth of spaces behind that. That has to be refined significantly as time goes on.
Oh, I understand that. I'm in my head logically thinking. I was just wondering
Yep.
what I would do in my brain for that. Thank you for that. A question about the green roof that you showed. Were students at all up there? Was that a learning space at all or not?
So I showed you two. One was the one that's in Meridian's center on their, I think it's called the 7th floor, but I think it's the 5th floor above that entry level. And apparently they are able to use that space. I've never seen anybody in it, and I've been there 4 times, but I don't know whether that means that they get certain allowances to go in there or not. The one that you saw that we shared with you from Community College of Philadelphia in West Philadelphia, nobody's allowed on.
Okay. Okay. I was just, because that seems like with the steel standards that you mentioned, that seemed like that. First, green roofs was a topic on the PSSAs one year, just sharing that connection. But it seems like that could possibly be something cool, but I didn't know if it had been done before. So I wasn't sure if there's a lot of safety concerns, which there might be. So anyway, thank you for that answer. And the only thing that I would ask, and this is probably more towards the school administration to share with that, but when discussing the insides, like the use of the learning stairs, because I know you said that some schools say they use them, some schools that like there's this very mixed bag, and also the types of furniture that you use, because, well, depending on the types of students I'm in front of, I might want chairs with wheels and I might not, depending on their maturity. So that being said, I would love just a quick capture of if the teachers think they would want learning stairs or not, or if they could see themselves trying it out or not. I would just love to see if they would want to embrace that and how many of them there would be, and just a quick capture of that data. I think that would be helpful. So anyway, I think that's it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, the only last thing is, I know you met with the sustainability group and you had a big conversation about LEED. Are we trying to, because it is, not many schools in this area have that LEED scorecard. Is that a goal of yours to try to be in that? Or are you looking for us to see if that's a goal? Because if most of the school districts in Pennsylvania that you showed us are not, and it's going to cost us more, I want to just be able to evaluate that and make sure we're not trying to reach something that's too expensive for us.
Right. Good point. The end of the conversation was a preference to be, I'm going to do this, LEED-like. In other words, let's go ahead and do a LEED scorecard to understand where this project would be, but not pursue it from the financial perspective. There are reasons to do it. There were reasons to do it. Department of Education used to give you additional monies if you were a LEED Gold project. The other thing was we had a grant structure in place called the ACE grant structure that for quite a while was, if the application passed, you ended up getting up to $2 million towards your project. Some of that money went to the sustainable elements that you put on the building. The rest you could build back into your construction cost. So there was a true reason and value to doing that over time for several $1 million. That ACE grant has not come back out in several years. We don't know if it will again. And so for that purpose, we agree, I think, that in general, you like to pursue the sustainable goals, but not put the extra money into doing something like that. And that makes sense.
Thank you. And I would say that we are definitely a grant proactive district, especially even more recently. So as we're looking through these things, if you are up to date with anything that allows us to be more advanced and apply through a grant, please let us know.
Even better than us, your construction manager follows us closely because they're very interested in helping you with that too.
Thank you.
So you have a team that can look for that.
All right, I see no other comments or questions. Dr. Zerbe. Thank you very much for presenting tonight. We appreciate this.
Thank you, David, and thank you, Devin, for the presentation this evening. The last slide of this overall presentation is in the first presentation, last page. It's up on the screen now, and it really refers to the high school decision timeline moving forward. So I'm going to kind of go through this, but we want to make sure that we obviously starting with this evening with our work session. We're going to provide an update in July. We are looking to come before the Board of School Directors at the August 20th meeting with the presentation of the concepts and the outline of the next steps. So all the work that we're doing to bring the 3 concepts as part of the March 26th approval to move concepts forward are going to be delivered on the 20th. And then on the 27th, we're going to use the data from the concepts in terms of cost and provide the board and the community an understanding of the budget impact analysis, the cost, risk limitations associated with financing any of those concepts or concepts in those cost ranges. And then once we have that initial those 2 initial meetings on the 20th and 27th of August, we'll then move into getting the public informed. Now certainly along this timeline, there will be communications coming out of our district to save the dates, updates on all the meetings that will occur, plus kind of rehashing what decisions have already been made, what information is still out there. We'll probably be updating the website associated with the Methacton High School campus planning process. But we will be moving into this open public forum where we're going to have a direct opportunity to share and to get feedback from the public as the dates are outlined there, with the hope that we're able to then take that feedback and present on the 17th of September back to the board on the feedback that we received. And then we will seek additional direction from the board with respects to the concepts, or things like, hey, should we modify this? Should we modify that? Here are some of the things we need to consider, whatever that might be. And then for us to, have another meeting in October 2nd, and then the special meeting as we discussed in the March 26th vote. We will have that special meeting on the 9th of October. Where we present the status of everything up to date. We will seek a vote on a resolution for moving one of those concepts, or the potential for moving the concept of new construction forward, and then deciding which concept design or a combination of those designs. We want to create those presentations so there's flexibility in the decision-making process. And then we also then would seek a vote to proceed with schematic design. So when it talks about potential, we also recognize that this is several months. These are a lot of large decisions that need to be made. The assumption is that we also have some holdover dates in October where we have the work session meeting, and we also have the voting meeting in October if we need to do additional follow-up and other meetings to present or represent information. But generally speaking, this timeline is designed for us to if we're going to realize the construction of a new high school, regardless of the design, that it allows us to stay on track to open a new school if that's what the board so decides. And I believe it would be the fall of 2028. Is that correct? Yeah. So the concept is we certainly, if we want to build a new school, we don't want to be opening up the school and transferring kids in December or January or any time during the middle of a school year. So generally speaking, this timeline gets us to a decision-making point about how we want to proceed forward with addressing the challenges associated with this campus. Hopefully, we can come to a determination whether it is to build a new school and continue moving forward with the process, or choose some other alternative aside from what has been before you. But the key element is to understand that by doing this, it fits into a larger timeline, that if schematic design is decided, we can move on to the next step and the next step, and we could likely, if everything works and materializes going forward, you could have a new school and having students moving in August of 2028. So with that, and with the presentation of the timeline, I'll take some questions. Ms. Alston.
Yeah, thank you. I have a concern about this timeline, given that our whole why for doing this is the educational programming, is the educational impact of the school. And I remember when we were looking at Arrowhead, it was a very teacher-led discussion about what they want, why they want it, how that would impact the programming. And I'm not seeing that in here. So that actually, this timeline gives me great concern that this is not a big part of that.
Yeah, I appreciate you bringing that to our attention. And certainly it's not that it wasn't planned. The teachers really have input in terms of, the way things are structured, furniture, all the things that are associated with the details of any of this are done when we start talking about schematic design. So the concepts are general, saying, hey, we're going to put a building kind of like in area 1, or we're going to put a building in area 2, and our architects are able to say, we can make that work in that footprint. And we're going to say, well, you need a gymnasium, and a gymnasium is going to be, say, X number of seats, and same with the auditorium and all of those things. And while there can be some changes and modifications, they're general concepts that are associated with projected cost. Once we decide that, hey, we kind of like concept 1, but we like the pool out of concept 3, and we like the auditorium out of concept 2, the architects come back and say, okay, now here's that rendering of the plan. We go ahead and we associate the cost with that. We determine whether or not we can afford that concept, and then if that's something we can afford and it looks good on paper, we then proceed with the schematic design, which automatically, just like in the Arrowhead project, we're like almost twice a week working with groups of teachers through that whole process. And that, I believe, is that a 6 or a 9 month or 9-month process? So this timeline is very specific to the initial phase of the 3 concepts. So the initial phase, we decided in March 26th of 24, was to bring the concepts, just general ideas, forward, and to decide whether or not we can afford, and it is the best if it is the best decision for the district to do this. We are far from getting all the important details, as you recognize, from our teaching staff. While we've had conversations with them, even through the Methacton High School campus planning process, things like having certain spaces for work study for our special needs students, and having the apartment program, all that stuff that you read about was not just talked about by members of the public, but that floated up through the discussions that our administrative team had with groups of teachers over a 2-week period during the Methacton High School campus planning process. So instead of having teachers come out on Saturdays with us, we had their attention during the week. And so we gathered all that information that was included as part of the process. So we're far from getting all those details and the things that are important, like how are we going to create the wings? I've heard some comments here, well, I like that the math teachers can be all together, but another concept, the teachers might say, well, we rather do it by level, or by grade level, or by some other means. So those types of conversations are certainly on the trajectory to be had, but we're way too early to have that at this point in time, not knowing whether or not, we can actually put a building and a building that will meet our needs, and the circulation and the parking and all those types of things, all of the things that are related to the campus, and we can reasonably afford it, and we recognize what the impact to the budget would be.
If I may just suggest, though, that looking at this decision timeline, it looks like it's based on kind of board meetings and public feedback. So I would suggest to put teacher input into this timeline as part of it, just because, someone reading this or a teacher reading this, I don't want the teachers to feel left out of this process, because they are really the driver of this whole thing. So I would like to see that in there.
Now I understand what you're saying. Yeah. And certainly we have our timeline on paper is much more detailed with meetings with our teachers than what you see on the screen here. These are the things that are public facing.
Of
that I
cour-
wanted
And
to
as a
share.
public facing,
Yeah.
we need to have that in there.
Thank you for the
Thank you.
suggestion. I appreciate it. Ms. Steele?
Yeah, just going off that, I didn't even realize that makes so much sense. Maybe just also defining the difference between a schematic design and the concept design, because that makes so much more sense now, because that's where you would receive the feedback on the learning stairs. And, right?
Yeah.
That's where all that would come into play.
Correct.
And I was thinking that that would be not at a different timeline. So that makes total sense. So that would be really helpful.
Thank you. Ms. Perdue?
I only had one comment, and I think some of that has been touched on already, because in your presentation or the timeline, you have the 29th as if needed, vote on concept design, schematic design. So maybe that needs to be altered to not show schematic design vote, right? Because it's like slash. And are we really you said that process can take months?
Yes.
So then it shouldn't be a slash vote on schematic design, right?
I think I understand what you're saying. I tried to get everything on this slide in a
Okay.
condensed format, but what it's supposed to mean is we would proceed with the process of schematic design or vote to do that. So for example, you would say, I like this concept, and now we move to the next phase of the process.
We're doing that the week before the special meeting, right? Because you have the 9th as vote to
the spe-
proceed
the-
with
well, the
schematic design.
Yeah, the special meeting would do several things. It would present the current status of what we've done to date in terms of the concepts. It would then seek a vote on the resolution to build a new high school. It would then, if we're prepared to at this time, vote on which concept design we want. And if prepared, we can vote to proceed with schematic design. If we're not prepared on the 9th of October, we also have the work session in October, and we also have the voting meeting as the 29th of October, where we can have those additional votes if we
Yeah,
need
not to interject, but exactly what they're trying to say is that there's
It's
two
not
different
clear.
wordings. So it sounds like we're trying to vote for the exact schematic design. But in truth, we're looking to now we're voting we've accepted that we're going to do this. Next is we're going to do schematic design. So it does sound a little bit confusing that we're voting on the actual design of the building when it's the next step that we're moving to.
I don't
Yeah,
think
I'm-
it's
I'm
a
trying to
matter
re-
that it sounds. I think if this is the timeline that's going to go on the website, I think it should be clear exactly what we're doing. So it's laid out to anyone that looks to see, okay, what's the board at this public meeting, what is happening? And I think that's all I'm trying to get to, because to me, it's not clear that on the 29th, we're voting on just a concept design. It looks like we're doing both, or either or, I don't know, but.
So when we post something to the website, we'll clear that up. I appreciate you bringing that to my attention. Just as a reference, I tried to get this, this all on one slide and had to cut a lot of the wording out. So I do apologize for the confusion. Other questions? Ms. Clary?
Yeah, I don't mean to harp on this, but I understood 10/29 to be an alternative date because it says if needed.
That's correct.
Right. So I just want to make sure there's no confusion. Ms. Perdue, I think 10/29, we could say it probably better. Sure. What if we said alternative date? Alternative or additional date to?
It's not the alternative or if needed vote. I think it's the fact that it says slash is where that to me needs to be clarified. I understand alternative date or if needed, that part. I think what we're trying to indicate is that someone is going to pick this up, and the timeline
gotcha.
to me is not clear as far as what action would be required from the
So
board.
if it was if what it says at 10/9 was repeated on 10/29 and just said, alternative date, wouldn't that do it? Because it says under 10/9, vote to proceed with schematic design potential. Would that do it? Yeah. That's just an idea, just trying to help
Thank
you out.
you.
Okay.
I appreciate that. So what I'll make some modifications and share that back out just for some feedback, because it is important that, this timeline is clear, and not only for members of the public, but certainly for members of the board, because, this is a pretty, detailed in terms of the trajectory for our decision-making process. Ms. Clary, do you have any other questions? Okay.
No.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Purdue?
I just have one more in reference to the public feedback, and I know you mentioned postcards and we'll communicate on the campus planning. When will those postcards go out? Just because I know last time there were people that said they didn't receive and they weren't informed, and I'm just trying to see if you have an idea of when we plan to get that out.
Yeah, we do. We have a I'll call it a draft a sequence of communications, types of communications, cadence of communications that we're ready to go. I don't have that with me. Certainly, we can share that with the members of the board once we finalize it. We wanted to make sure that we got through this evening's meeting to see if there's any modifications necessary for the schedule. Apparently, there's some wording stuff that we're going to modify, and we're going to add some things in there to recognize that teachers are part of the process, even though my detailed one already has that. And then we will, get that one posted and shared with the board. Other questions on anything from the initial part of the presentation to the timeline, or anything from the Schrader Group at this moment in time? Seeing none, thank you for your patience and your stamina in this presentation. We do appreciate it. So that ends the guests and scheduled speakers for this evening. We do not have any scheduled speakers for next week. We will go through the reports next week. Obviously, hear public comment on board action items next week. Fiscal items, Mr. Booker.
Thank you, Dr. Zerbe. This month for your approval is the list of bills, the treasurer's report. There are no budgetary transfers. The school breakfast and lunch prices for the K to 8 levels, there's a 10-cent increase, which is created by using the paid lunch equity tool. For the high school, there is a 15-cent increase and a 5-cent increase on the a la carte pricing. The next item is the adult breakfast and lunch prices. These went up 15 cents also, with the breakfast meal price increasing 20 cents and the adult meal price increasing 20 cents at the high school, and the a la carte price increasing by 10 cents. Next, we have the unallocated fund balance, which is 7% of the excess of the budget to be transferred to the capital project fund. And finally, we have the student activity accounts to approve the closure of the student activity account for the class of 2024, with any remaining funds to be distributed in accordance with policy 618, and approve the creation of the student activity account for the class of 2028.
Thank you, Mr. Booker. Any questions from members of the board to my right? Seeing none. To my left? Seeing none. Thank you, Mr. Booker. Personnel items, Dr. Sorgini.
Thank you, Dr. Zerbe. For the consideration of the board this month, personnel items are as follows. 1 resignation classified, Stephen Griswack, HVAC Master Mechanic at Facilities. 1 employment administrator, Kimberly Steffi, Director of Business Services, effective on or about August 27, 2024. Ms. Kimberly Steffi has served school districts in the business office in multiple capacities for the past 17 years. Ms. Steffi began her service to schools as an accountant for Pennsbury School District, where she was for 8 years. She then served as the finance officer of Valley Day School, and subsequently as the financial services manager of Neshaminy School District. For the past 5 years, Ms. Steffi has served as the Director of Financial Services, Assistant Business Administrator, and School Board Treasurer in Pennsbury School District. Ms. Steffi earned a Bachelor of Science degree in Business Administration Accounting from Widener University and a Master of Business Administration from LaSalle University. She is also a past president of the Delaware Valley Association of School Business Officials, which we call DeVasbo, which is the Southeastern local affiliate of the Pennsylvania Association of School Business Officials, which is known as PASBO. We look forward to welcoming Kimberly to the Methacton family and look forward to her leadership in the business office. We have one employment professional, Sarah John, school counselor at the high school. We welcome Sarah to the Methacton family. 2 employments classified, Anthony Cruz Morales and Jonas Murphy, both for student summer work. We thank Anthony and Jonas for taking on these positions this summer. 1 change of status administrative, Danielle Penza, from Assistant Director of Business Services to Interim Director of Business Services, effective from July 1st to on or about August 26th. We're grateful to Danielle for her continued leadership in the department. There are 2 changes of status classified. Christina Smith from Personal Care Assistant at Arrowhead to Bus Assistant at Transportation, and David DeHaven from Information Technology Specialist at Farina to System Administrator at Farina. We thank Chrissy and Dave for taking on these new roles. And we also have supplemental contracts for Spring Athletic Coach Extended Season Pay, the Curriculum Instruction and Assessment Department for both the end of the 23-24 school year and the 24-25 school year, Pupil Services Department for the same time periods, and then also room movements, fall coaches, and activity sponsors, all for the 24-25 school year. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Sergini. Any questions from members of the board to my left? Ms. Alston?
Yeah, just on 10G, Danielle Penza, I don't know what is normally done with these types of interim positions, but for her to be stepping up to such a big role, that monthly stipend seems rather small to me. So maybe, that's my opinion, maybe worth taking a look at. That's all.
Yeah, the stipend has been consistent for the positions in the past.
Okay.
Any other questions, members to my left? Ms. Purdue?
I just have one for 10C1 for the new business service director or director of business services. What is the transition plan like once she step in?
Assuming that she is approved next week, she would likely tender her resignation in her current district the following day. We have been informed that she has a 60-day hold in her current contract, which is why the on or about effective date of August 27th. During the summer months, as she is able to spend some time here, she certainly will. But we are confident in the continued leadership of Danielle Penza during that time period.
Any other questions from members to my left? Seeing none, members to my right? No questions? Thank you, Dr. Sergini. And we move on to curriculum and programs. We have no items. And then policy, Dr. Regina.
Thank you, Dr. Zerbe. The items on the agenda are from first read last month, so there are no changes with not having a policy committee meeting this month. The one addition that you will notice on the agenda, though, is policy 327, which is under repeal. We did have a notice of intent to repeal in January. We just did not have put 327 on the February agenda, so we're making sure that we repeal it now. There is no need to do another notice of repeal. We can now put it on repeal, though, from our January agenda. So if you're noticing there's a new one on there, that's why. We already done the notice, and now we're going to add it to the repeal with 350. So thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Regina. Any comments from members to my right? Seeing none, members to my left? Seeing none. Thank you, Dr. Regina. Under other, we have trips, approve the Methacton High School trip to participate in the national competition teams as listed June 26th through July 1st, held in Orlando, Florida. Transportation, there are 4 new drivers listed. And under 13D, the annual authorization to allow the superintendent to hire to fill open budgeted positions between July 1, 24 through September 15th, 24, when the failure to hire prior to September 15th could, in the professional opinion of the superintendent, impair the ability of the district to appropriately fill open positions for the 24-25 school year. And with that, that ends the items for your consideration next week, and I'll turn the meeting over to our president.
We have listed then dates for board members' calendars. Just definitely make sure you look that we don't have any committee meetings at this point scheduled for July or August on this here. I know we are looking to schedule some committee meetings in
Yeah, we're
August.
working to
correct?
schedule a property committee meeting and a finance committee meeting in August.
Okay, if we don't have a date yet set for that though, correct?
I don't have the
Okay,
date.
so we'll look for July, just for the public to know. July, we'll have the August work sessions, committee meetings there. Anything for old business or new business? All right, seeing none, we're going to move to courtesy of the floor. So the Board of School Directors will now provide an opportunity for residents to make comment on matters that are or may be before the board. The board asks that you keep your comments to 3 minutes or less. The Board of School Directors may choose to respond to matters following the conclusion of the comments. Please submit questions via email to information@methacton.org.
Good evening. John Andrews, Lower Providence. Just a few quick thoughts on the campus planning presentation of this evening. Ideally, I probably have a half hour's worth of constructive comment. With regard to these postcards for informing the public and leading up to 2 dates in September for the public comment, I think rather than a postcard, probably ought to be a 6-page document so that the public understands what's going on. The postcards that came out earlier this year, I think, were absolute failures in many respects. No, we don't have a local newspaper where press releases end up in substantial numbers of the public being informed. And I think overall the schedule is going too fast. And for instance, it seems from a few comments that the teachers are not being involved, except perhaps for furniture selection. The presentation of an aerial view of the campus with different areas in red that are off limits to a new building. And then there was a yellow area identified as development thing number 2. And I didn't fall asleep, but I didn't see any evidence of a development area number 1. And we're in a period now when there's 3 concepts to be proposed. So it seems like the architect is looking at just 2 areas. And I continue to propose an area 3, namely the present high school, how that would be modified in a renovation. And perhaps with a renovation, the whole process of activity could be shortened up by a year. With regard to the natatorium,
I'm sorry, Mr. Andrews, it's 3 minutes are up.
you are
I apologize.
consistently
I know, I'm following
shortchanging
board
the
policy.
public,
I apologize.
apologizing. I think it's a failure as to your understanding of what the public
Thank you very much,
can
Mr.
contribute.
Andrews. Is there any follow-up on questions or comments at all at this time? All right. Do I have a motion to adjourn? Ms. Olson, do I have a second? Ms. Purdue? Meeting is adjourned.